Welcome everybody to Boxing Bonanza. I'm joined by the very talented Dewi Powell. How are you, Dew?
I'm all good, thanks, John. Really grateful for you having me on.
Oh, no problem at all, but so it's exciting times for you at the moment. For those who don't know, can you explain what's going on?
Yeah, so last Friday, we released the Welsh Boxing Annual. So this is an account of the boxing season from September 2019 to September 2020. Boxing is kind of like 365 days now, isn't it? It never stops. But in the olden days, maybe like 10 years ago, the season in the pros used to be September to July. You'd have August off and then go again in September. So just for the purposes of an annual, the book follows that September to September period, which has been quite eventful.
Yeah, that's great, and I keep seeing them everywhere. I see people have ordered. What's that like? What's it like with the feedback coming back to you?
Yeah, the reception's been really good. So I started writing this last October, and then from that point, sort of wrote everything as it happened, if you like. So I've written it in silo, really, and I was a little bit apprehensive, given that my partner Chloe was the only person who was proofreading it at that point. I was a little bit apprehensive of whether it was any good, because it is a format that includes features, ringside reports, interviews, all sorts of content. So I was wondering how it would flow, essentially. But the feedback so far has been really good. I was quite lucky to get some good reviewers on board. So I had Michael Perlman from the BBC, Anson Wainwright from the Ring magazine, Andy Clark from Sky Sports, and Tris Dixon, who's a former editor of Boxing News, freelancer, now probably one of my favorite authors and writers. So great feedback from them, constructive stuff, and some. It's always nice to have a little bit of a pat on the back, isn't it? I think in life I'm one of those people who I don't really care what other people think, but then you spend a lot of time and energy on something, and you realize you probably do care what people think in the end.
Yeah, of course. That's what it's about, really, isn't it? Especially with writing, you want your art appreciated. So with the sales side of things, I know we just say fourth in the charts. Did you just say?
Yeah, so when we released it last Friday. When I released it last Friday, I had a bit of a boost on that initial 2 days. So we were up to fourth on the Amazon Boxing Books rankings, which was good. So I think the only person above us was Tyson Fury, and it was his paperback, ebook, and audiobook as well, I think. So there was only really one book in front of us. Eddie Hearn was behind us, so that was nice that was a nice little angle to it. But no, we're a little bit further down a week on. But yeah, the reception so far has been really good, and hopefully, in the build up to Christmas, it gets a little bit better as well.
So how long was this an actual idea in your head? How long have you been wanting to put this into action?
Probably since last October. So we were on holiday at the time, and I read every book that I think I'd taken about 6 books with me, and I probably read about 1 or 2 books, probably a book a month usually. But I was, with that, a little bit more free time, I was flying through my books, and then I was starting for my website, boxingwales.com. I was starting the preview for Jay Harris against Paddy Barnes. And I thought, I've got a lot to say here. And at that point, I wasn't really sure that putting that much time and energy into the website was worth it. It would get a bit annoying where we'd have great engagement on social media. You'd have like 100 likes on a story. And then you look at the website analytics, and it'd be about 13 people clicking through, 23 people clicking through. And I think people essentially, through digital platforms, I think they just want the who, what, when, where, and whatever. And you can stick all that in the social media post. They don't need to click through to the story most of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I was kind of thinking of my own reading behavior. When I look at a web story, I very rarely read it properly. I'll just scan read it because it's so easy to do. And there's so much attention, where I thought, whenever I read a book, I read the book, chapter by chapter, and you invest a little bit more attention in it. So I thought the book was worth doing from that point of view, that if I wanted to put my time and energy into, and it's spare time and energy as well, it's not like my day job or anything, but if I wanted to spend that time and energy on something, I wanted it to be read properly, and I wouldn't really care if it was a smaller readership than the website, because there's been times when the website's been really busy, but I just want it to be read properly, essentially. So that was last October, started it, and then concluded at the end of August.
Yeah, like you said, like on social media, you could scroll past it and read it, but people are buying you a book with the intention to read it. So what was your favorite part of, because this must have been a long process, I imagine. What was your favorite part of the process?
Probably, I love Jay Harris's story. So Jay, at the start of so in like October in the book, Jay is fighting Paddy Barnes, and then and I think it was January the 3rd, the news got broke that he had the world title shot, and then he had the world title shot, and he fought an absolutely fantastic fight with Julio Cesar Martinez. And Jay is, I don't think he realizes how good an interview he is, because he's so authentic and he's so unscripted and so honest as well. A lot of boxers are, once you bypass the bravado that naturally comes with boxing, boxers can be really honest and really good subjects to interview. So Jay's story, for me, is one of the highlights of the book, because I got a lot from him, and there was a lot to cover in that time period.
Because I'm hoping now this is going to be a continuous boxing annual that's going to carry on through the years and will be a must-have gift for boxing fans. Is that the plan?
Yeah, it is the plan. So starting again is from September 2020 through to 2021. I've already started. So the next book is going to start with Ricky Wright emceeing a world title fight, the first Welsh person to MC a world title fight since 1963, I believe, when Howard Winston last fought in Porthcawl, his last fight as well, I think, when he fought Jose Legra, and lost his WBC title. So it's a little bit, well, it's a big bit of history, I consider that, for Ricky there. And then Liam Williams obviously fought last weekend. So did Maxie Hughes. Maxie's a bit of a adopted Welshman. His father's from Llanelli.
Yeah.
And I've probably had a bit of an influence in reinforcing that with Maxie routinely. And he's in really rich vein of form at the minute. And then this weekend we've got Jay. So already the work started for the next one, and fingers crossed it can become a regular thing with regular interest as well.
So I want to take it right back now, Dew, just out of interest, and I'm sure everybody else would find interest. And where it all started in boxing for you? Where did the boxing love stem from?
My first ever boxing memory is my dad having a VHS tape, which seems ancient now, doesn't it? And I must have been less than 10 years old. I don't know how young, basically. And on one side, it was Ali versus Fraser, Thriller in Manila. And on the other side, it was Ali versus Foreman, Rumble in the Jungle. I obviously didn't know what I was watching. I just knew that it was big and exciting, and it was two fellas fighting. And then from that point, so when I was very early teens, Ricky Hatton and Joe Kozagi were, the main men. Absolutely loved the both of them. And I was quite where I'm from. So I'm from a little village called Cascade in the Rumney Valley, and I was a little bit lucky that like a couple of miles one way you'd have Joe Kozagi living, Robbie Regan, and then later on Gavin Rees as well in Newbridge, and they're all within quite a small, a very small area. And I was going to, I must have been about 11. And I was going up the hill to Gethley Amateur Boxing Club every now and then, like never regularly, because I wasn't any good at all. You go for a week, and then like 4 months later, you go for another week. And I was playing rugby at the time, and I was probably a little bit deluded. I happened to play in a good team, and I was average or below average, but playing in a good team that wins, you tend to stick with that. That gym was Gethley Amateur Boxing Club, which had Di Gardner. Little did I know that Di was involved in numerous champions and contenders as well. So it was probably from that point. And then as I grew into my teens, you discover fighters like Jay. I remember discovering James Toney on YouTube, maybe like 2006 or something, and being mesmerized. And then I think I watched his fight with Iron Barkley, and then went further back and watched Iron Barkley against Roberto Duran. And Duran, you see him over my shoulder there. Duran is my favorite ever fighter. So yeah, it was just from that sort of mid-teens then. It was probably the point that I lived it at that stage, and wanted to know everything I could know about it.
Because, like you say, knowing everything that you could know. I can remember my first time when I met you. I think it was Leicester after one of Alex Hughes's fights. And I've never told you this, but I can remember listening to you. I think Kieran Gibbons was there, Gary Lockett, and you was talking, and I was just amazed by the knowledge you had. And I was just thinking to myself, I want to, that's what I want to be. I want to know the sport as much as that man.
I know a lot, but there's a good thing about boxing. Well, two good things about boxing. There's always more to learn, and it's the most accessible sport you can get. So I've got, friends who flutter around football. I've got friends who are rugby players, but those sports probably benefit from being so professional that they're a bit more restrictive, and the barrier to entry is a bit higher. But boxing is I feel like it's such a working class sport. Everyone is so friendly and so welcoming, and the way boxing is set up is that they need that exposure. So I feel like boxing is such a welcoming sport. There probably wasn't a better sport for me to get obsessive about, because doors are constantly being opened. Most people are I find very welcoming in boxing. So it's a perfect sport, to obsess over in that sense, I think.
What was the best moment in Welsh boxing been for you since you've been involved?
Good question. 2 points probably. So full disclosure, I probably should admit that I've not just been a writer or sort of part journalist for some time, but there was a point where I was doing Nathan Cleverley's website and some of his social media, and that first Cleverley Bellew fight, when Nathan won it and we were in Liverpool, and I was very young and probably very naive then. I think I must have been about 18 or 19. Was that 2011? Yeah, it would have been 19. I was very young and very naive. And when Nathan won that fight, personally, that was I was high on that, because I think a lot of people thought he might slip up, and there was a lot of, you probably can remember, there was a lot of stuff that went on that wasn't great. Background. I say background, a lot of it was in the forefront as well. But yeah, that personally was great. I was very close to Nathan for a number of years. But following that, I can remember being completely spellbound. 2015, O2 Arena, Lee Selby against Gradovic, and I think Lee didn't lose a minute of that fight, and that was obviously his first world title win. Hopefully, he'll have another one in the future. But yeah, that was probably one of the fights I was at where it was like everything seemed to go right for Lee that night. That was a high as well, I think.
So broadening the horizon on that question, off the back of that question, what do you think is the best boxing moment in Welsh history?
Oh, my days. That's a big question. I would say, I can only really speak from my time. There's so many good stories on there. Calzaghe's run at the end. So a lot of people only tend to remember the end of Joe's career, where for a long time, they were struggling to sell out the ice rink in Cardiff. It was a hard slog at points. But I think Joe's run from like Lacey, Kessler, Hopkins, and less of the Roy Jones fight, because we all know Roy Jones was a little bit past it at that point. But yeah, that run from Joe, I was fully mesmerized. At that stage, I would have been like 14, 15, 16. And I can remember the Hopkins win clearly, because I was in school, and like sort of my friends all had like a passing interest in boxing, and they all thought Calzaghe was going to win easy. And I was like, oh, I don't know, guys. Like I was a little bit worried. And I can remember going back to school on that Monday morning and getting ribbed because I doubted him and because I thought Hopkins might win. But that was in my time, that was a particular high, wasn't it? Joe becoming the 2-weight world champion. Ever is a difficult question, isn't it? So many greats. Howard Winston eventually doing it after. We always say, don't we? We look at world title challengers now. You might get someone who challenges for a world title 3 or 4 times. And like say Martin Murray, I think he might be on 5 times. You get that now. People say that wouldn't happen back in the day. Well, it did for Howard Winston. It took him 4 turns to do it. And when he eventually did it, that was great. I think it's too difficult to say. There's so many big moments. Steve Robinson doing it on about 5 minutes notice was another one that was great.
Jimmy Wilde had some fantastic moments through his career.
Yeah, Freddie Welsh, Jimmy Wilde's like the best ever, isn't he? My parents were in the process of moving now, and they're going to Quakers Yard, and I've heard that there's apparently a pub in Quakers Yard that has Jimmy's Corner, which is where he used to drink. So whenever the world's back to normal, I'm finding that a good excuse for a pub crawl.
Yeah, sure thought. So you've been heavily involved with boxing since you started in with it. Where did the relationship with Nathan Cleverly start?
So when I started off, I did a couple of pieces for Box Rec News, which isn't a thing anymore. And then I did a couple of pieces for Seconds Out, and which still is a thing now. I think they're more, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're more focused on video than written stuff at the minute. I probably could go back at those pieces and cringe because I was like so young writing them now. But yeah, I had some good access to Nathan, and Nathan used to train in a village called Bargard, which was about 5 minutes up the road from where I lived. So I was lucky again in that sense. So I had established a good relationship with Nathan. Then his brother Carl, who used to handle some things for him at the time, invited me to contribute to the website, and that developed over time. And he had a really good run. I think at the point I got involved formally would have been his first world title fight against Koziemski, and then obviously he had a number of big fights after that, and then concluded the last. I didn't go to the Badu Jack fight, but the last one was in Germany against Jürgen Bremer, which it wasn't the best fight, but it didn't matter. It was just about the result on that night, and he did it. And I know that I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the WBA regular is the top of the pile, but it still was a great achievement to get that win over there.
Yeah, of course, especially from a little country like Wales.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's happening with Cleverly now? I've seen he hinted at a comeback not so long ago.
I don't know, in all honesty, John, I don't know what's happening. I hope he doesn't come back to boxing. He doesn't need to. My personal opinion is that he wouldn't achieve anything he hasn't done already. So, I hope there's not a comeback. And I don't really know what's happening at the moment, mate.
On that journey with him, I must have taken him on some experiences. What was the best experience?
Germany was a great trip. But before that, Chicago against Fanfara wasn't a win, but we went over there. No, I'll tell anyone, I knew he was gonna be really, really good in that fight, and he was. And I was the only Welsh journalist to go over to that fight, which wasn't surprising because it wasn't for a world title or anything, and it was on a Friday night rather than a Saturday. It wasn't in like New York. It was a bit further over in Chicago. But I can remember seeing Nathan a couple of times in training and realizing that he was firing for that fight. And then the fight happened, and it was an absolute barn burner. Probably the best fight I've ever seen. So that, although Nathan didn't get a win, that was a real good memory. And then I came back. The day after I came back, someone crashed into me, which wasn't, I don't know why I'm laughing now. It wasn't ideal as well.
Yeah.
And then 50 weeks later, I had the court date for this person who crashed into me, who was disputing a load of stuff because he was a bit of a plonker. But I had the court date, and the solicitor rang me, and I was like, yeah, cool. We'll do that date, whatever. And I was thinking, that date seems familiar. And it was a day before Nathan's fight in Germany. And by that point, I couldn't change the date, which wasn't ideal. So I had the court case on a Friday morning. I won it. And then I think we flew overnight to Germany, to Berlin. And then the fight was in a place called, I think it was called Neubrandenburg or Neubrandenburg. One of the worst places you could ever go. There's nothing there. I think it was like being back in my little village in the valleys. There was a post box, a chip shop, and a pub, and that was about it. It was such a weird place. And like the fight was it was like a very nice leisure center, just a weird setting to have a world title fight. And because it was East Germany, I was assuming, given the state of the place, it was like former Soviet, didn't have a lot of investment ever, and hasn't had a lot of investment since the Berlin Wall came down. But yeah, that was 50 weeks to the day from the Funfara fight that we went to Germany then. And I can remember being nervous for that, really nervous for that fight, because I thought if it goes to points and it's close, we know I was going to go. Like if Nathan won, he'd have to win well over there.
Yeah.
And he did. I don't care if anyone says Bramer wasn't injured. He just didn't fancy a challenge because he's not had one in so long. So that, that fight went the way it did. But I was so nervous for it, and there was a free bar, so I enjoyed that. Can't remember a great deal of the fight. Can't remember anything after it. And I think I was in Germany like less than 24 hours, and then we were on our way back the next day, which was it was a good night but a painful morning, similar to Leicester when I saw you there.
Yeah. Oh, I know that was a rough morning as well. I can imagine what the flight was like the following morning.
These are the reasons I don't drink anymore. I can't handle those mornings.
Until you want to go to Jimmy Wild's corner.
Yeah, until I go there.
So all this we've just spoken about, and I was had a little giggle to myself earlier on when I went onto your Instagram, and your bio was something like, I walk my dog, write about boxing, and watch football, something like that. What would you actually label yourself as? A boxing journalist, an analyst? Oh, I can't even say the word. Writer?
Yeah, I'd say writer. So I've done back in the day, I say back in the day, everything seems back in the day now, probably like 2014-ish time. I did some videos for IFL. I think it's different when you're on video. I think it's harder to interview someone on video because when you can, like for example, for writing the book, a lot of the interviews either took place in person where you're sitting down with someone for an hour, or towards the end, because of the pandemic, they took place on the phone where you're on the phone to someone for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever it is, it's longer. So I basically feel like those formats suit me better because you're not just looking for the sound bites, you're looking for the story. And I think on videos, I probably get in the habit of interviewing for quotes rather than interviewing to find out a story, where I think naturally the quotes will come in that longer format. So yeah, I'd say writer. It's not like it's not like ever going to be my main job. I work for the NHS. It obviously is a very different capacity, but it's sometimes borders on a second job, which is not ideal, but I think the best way to enjoy it is to treat it like a hobby that you love. And, I've been doing it now 10 years. And I think the stuff I've probably done over the last 2 to 3 years is the stuff I can look back on and say, I think that's high quality. Before that, I feel like very much like I was always still learning.
Does the better half give you a dig sometimes and be like, forget about boxing, I'm here?
Yeah, she's Chloe is very much a boxing widow. So if you go on her, we've got a shared iPhone calendar where we're meant to put things in there that we'll go into, just so the other one knows, like if you forget, where's Dewi today? He's there wherever. If you look at the calendar, it's all my stuff. I'm like, Friday night blocked off, Maxie Hughes is fighting. Saturday night blocked off, Liam Williams is fighting. Sunday night blocked off, I'm writing. So yeah, Chloe's a boxing widow, but she's very supportive. So Chloe, I'm lucky that I met Chloe. I did journalism in uni, and Chloe did part honours journalism as well. So, and she works, she's a media relations officer now for the government. And so I'm lucky that I've got like a professional, someone who can look at things like with a professional writer's eye, to proofread and sound check and sense check everything that I do, which has been really, really helpful in writing this book. She doesn't know about boxing, but that's, well, she probably knows through osmosis more than I realize, but she doesn't know about boxing, but she knows like what reads well and what doesn't read well, crucially.
Yeah, it's great. Before I finish off there, I'm going to ask you some just boxing related questions, just random ones if that's right with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Favorite fighter ever? We've already answered that one.
Yeah, Roberto Duran easy, but I can say Roberto Duran easy, but like if I had to pick a second place, that'd be between about 5 or 6 different guys, so that'd be harder.
Let's hear them.
Well, Calzaghe and Hatton, just because when I was growing, I know in Hatton's case, he wasn't the best of his time, but like favorite fight is different, isn't it? You don't like them just because for that reason. But yeah, those two, James, Tony. I love Lomachenko. And what did I say else? I remember Andrew Selby's run as an amateur, where he was fighting. It seemed like every other month he was fighting WSB or European Championships, World Championships, and within some of those wins were amazing. I can remember he fought a Cuban at one of the World Championships, and it was probably, and I watched it on some dodgy Hungarian stream, and it was like one of the best performances I've ever seen from any fighter. I think you can quite comfortably say Andrew Selby was the best Welsh amateur of all time, given his achievements. Although Lauren Price probably runs him close now. But yeah, Andrew Selby would probably figure there as well for what he did as an amateur.
What an absolute talent that man is, and I hope he gets back onto the winning road and gets back to normal fighting ways. What's the best fight ever?
Best fight ever is Cleverly Fanfara. Cleverly Bellew won, runs it close. I think nowadays, you see so many fighters. You see so many fighters nowadays make up these grudge matches that you can tell they don't believe in. The one the other week between Tyrone McKenna and O'Hara Davis, they talked like they were going to rip lumps out of each other, and then they both fenced for 10 rounds and made sure they were that close to each other, which is fair enough. They're maximising their careers, making the money they can make. But Cleverly Bellew one was such a, for want of a better word, it was such a hateful fight. There was a lot of violence. I honestly think we've not seen a fight with two fighters in a British ring work the body so well as they did. Both of them, urinated blood, but afterwards, which is a sign of a not very pleasant experience. So yeah, that was another one. And then I would probably say the third one, December 2012, Tony Pace against Lance Sheehan was it was like a Rocky fight. It was fairly close back and forth. I think they traded probably 2 each traded rounds in the first 4 rounds, and then the 5th round, Lance punched the skin off Tony. Somehow Tony stayed in the fight and came back to win it. And probably run away with it in the last 3 rounds. So yeah, that was, I can remember at the time being absolutely amazed by that fight, and I still am today. Still got the program behind me.
Greatest trainer of all time?
Ooh, I don't know because like yourself, I'm fairly friendly with Gary Lockett, and Gary always tells me that the trainer doesn't make the fighter. The fight, the trainer can help a fighter, but a lot of the time, that fighter's going to be what he is, unless the trainer started with him from absolute scratch, which very rarely happens now. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of modern greats in there. Emmanuel Stewart. I read Andy Lee's autobiography earlier this year, which was a really interesting insight to Emmanuel Stewart. But like Emmanuel was picking up a lot of these guys when they were already world champions, and you could probably say the same for like Freddie Roach. In the last 10 years, he's worked with a lot of great fighters, but they were sort of already great fighters, if that makes sense. So I don't really have an answer because I don't really know.
Dream fight that never happened.
Roberto Duran against Chavez Sr. If that would have happened at lightweight or super lightweight, yeah, that would have been just a perfect fight, wouldn't it? Imagine both. Like what? I never really like making fights. When people say like, "Oh, what would have happened?" I saw one online today. What would have happened if Joe Kozagi fought James Toney? Well, you never know. So I'm never really that invested in those conversations. But like when you come to Duran and Chavez, I think Duran would have won it, but not with. I'm probably like 51-49 on that fight. I think it would have been an absolutely fantastic fight.
Yeah, an absolute war. You can just picture that fight, can't you?
Yeah, and they're both like similar dimensions. I think Duran probably boxed better, and Chavez, and like although Duran could fight, I think he probably boxed better than a lot of people realize. And I think Chavez probably would fight better, but at the same time, I can imagine them just cancelling each other out and both get into each other. Wouldn't really. I'd probably pick Duran by an absolute, hair.
Yeah. Yeah, you're an absolute gentleman, do. Before we finish, actually, do you want to give everybody a quick explanation of why they should buy your book and who will appeal to the most?
I think the book will appeal to anyone, whether you are a passing casual fan or whether you are a diehard, like myself. I think the book has something for everyone. I've been really lucky so we've got in the book 25 people interviewed, some of them interviewed a couple of times, and they've all been really honest and open. A lot of them have talked about sacrifices that underpin their success. Some of the topics in the book are controversial. So you've got coronavirus, obviously, covering that from March to now has been a big deal. There's the case where Julio Cesar Martinez failed a drug test, and it was sort of excused by the WBC and WADA, which is I won't say too much on that. Read the book, because I had to think long and carefully not to libel anyone in that chapter. But you've got Cody Davis touches on the loss of his sister, which I think is remarkable how open Cody has been on how that's affected the way that he views boxing. So it's not all rosy in there, is basically what I'm saying. I think a lot of everyone who's interviewed was very honest. All the interviews had no conditions. We live in a modern world where those people in the public eye is so carefully managed, and the interviews you can do sometimes is don't go to this area, don't go to that area. There was absolutely none of that. All the interviews as well were accepted at the first request, which is something that doesn't usually happen. It's not to say the book's perfect. I probably could have done with an interview Lauren Price, which I've chased and just wasn't able to secure. But I think there's a lot in there for people to enjoy, and it goes right the way from the small hall scene. So it starts with Angelo Dragoni against Christian Twos in September 2019. Again, was another controversial chapter, because the scorecard, which you can read the book to find out my feelings on the scorecard, and it goes all the way to world title fights and world title eliminators with Liam Williams and Lee Selby. And probably another reason to buy it is the way Lee Selby talks about making featherweight, which we all know. I think we all take for granted what boxers do to make weight. I probably could do with some of those behaviors to lose and maintain weight, because I've grown considerably over this. I've grown considerably over this COVID period, but some of the sacrifices that Lee talks about to make weight, they're sickening to listen to be honest. And again, incredibly honest from him, and it's a blessing. He no longer has to be that strict to make weight. But yeah, that's a little example of an eye opener in the book. So we go, like I say, all the way from the small hall scene to world titles, and I've probably blabbed on a bit too much about that now.
No, that's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant, Ben. And thank you very much for coming on, Dew. And I really hope you the best in the future. And I want to see this thriving over the years.
Cheers, John. I really appreciate it. And fingers crossed it does, mate.
No worries. Thank you very much, Dew.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.